his presentation speech last month when he was laying the budget before the National Assembly, he explained, what he said was this, and this is a quick quote. We plan to finance the deficit mainly by new borrowings totaling 8.8 trillion naira, and 206 billion naira from privatization proceeds, and 1.7 trillion naira drawdowns on bilateral and multilateral loans. End quote. However, the federal lawmakers are proposing a drastic measure to help the country out of the fiscal hole by placing 8 revenue-generating agencies on financial autonomy. Now, to this end, the National Assembly has moved to stop the agencies from spending their revenue arbitrarily by placing them on the cost of collection percentage. Now, in the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework, that's the MTEF, and the Fiscal Strategy Paper, the FSP, passed by the lawmakers, the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, Corporate Affairs Commission, the CAC, Nigeria Ports Authority, the NPA, Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, JAM, National Upstream Petroleum Regulation Commission, the NUPRC, the National Midstream and Downstream Regulatory Authority, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, and the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency will, from now on, operate under the cost of collection. Now, these agencies are to join the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Nigerian Customs Service as entities that enjoy the cost of collection percentages. Now, according to the lawmakers, the other 53 revenue-generating agencies will, with time, be similarly treated to improve revenue collection. Now, this means that the agencies listed above will not be able to use their discretion to spend their revenue for operations, and they have to remit the operating surplus as currently practiced. Now, instead, they will be given a fixed percentage of their revenue as cost collection. The decision by the lawmakers is coming off of the heels of an expose that came out of the public hearing on MTEF in August, where several agencies were indicted for spending their operating surpluses in breach of the provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Now, in some instances, operating costs were overblown with items like furniture, computers, equipment, operational vehicles, and others. In other instances, fully funded agencies that ought to have remitted 100% of their earnings still spent their internally generated income. Now, Section 22 of the FRA provides that partially funded agencies must remit 80% of their operating surplus to the consolidated revenue account, while the other 1/5 shall be transferred to its general reserve fund. That's where we are. So, today on the program, we'll find out why revenue-generating agencies do not remit as much as they generate, and how much leakages that we have in the system that gives room for reckless spending by some of these agencies, and the steps that are being taken to boost our income as as a country. So I still have Philemon Ajakuko here. Phil, you've listened to everything I've said. We're to be joined shortly by public affairs analyst Jide Ojo. He'll be joining us on the line shortly. So this is a problem. How bad do you think this problem is?
It's as bad as you can imagine. Nigeria is bleeding. When we say bleeding, it's bleeding horribly. The ease with which people have access to government money is frightening. It's frightening. The money's just there, and people pick it up as if they're their personal ATM. And that is because of the way the collection process is designed, as you have seen. A situation where an agency, it's very easy for them to come up with expense heads. Oh, we're going to buy computers. Oh, we're going to buy... sometimes they just copy and paste the budget. So what they did last year, they just copy and paste. And now nobody goes there to say, if you bought, what is the lifespan of a computer? What is the lifespan of a vehicle, operational vehicle? These things have standard. Nobody, you don't buy car every year. You don't buy a computer. You don't buy a phone every year. But they do these things, and these are all avenues through which money leaks through the system. Not only that.
Well, we've just been joined by Jide Ojo. Jide, good morning.
Good morning, Stanley. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm sure you've been following this story. All of these organizations that the National Assembly is saying, should actually be remitting to the federal government. But like the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, the Petroleum Regulatory Agencies, the National Ports Authority. And Phil also talked about how we designed our collection system. So, just looking at the MTEF and the FSP, what would you say would be the impact of moving these agencies to join the FIRS and the Nigeria Customs Service as revenue generating agencies?
Okay. First and foremost, I think Nigeria is just waking up due to the paucity of funds, revenue shortfall, and the fact that there is a lot of oil theft. Because for so long, over 50 years, we've relied heavily on oil revenue, and we never really bothered about the non-oil sector. Taxation, fees, and other collectibles by the government-owned enterprises have largely been diverted. Not until recently, maybe a couple of years ago, the government-owned enterprises started submitting their budgets to the National Assembly for passage. Over the years, many of them just collect revenues, spend as much as they like, place themselves on very fantastic salaries and allowances, and just remit whatever they feel like into the coffers of the federal government. And that's why you saw the former executive secretary of, or is it registrar of JAM, Professor Dibo Jerinde, who was recently dragged to court by the anti-corruption agencies that he embezzled so much, and he has to forfeit a lot of his properties. Not until Professor Isha Kolorede got to JAM did we know that JAM could actually be a revenue generation agency. And actually, coming to JAM and education parastatals or agencies, education is supposed to be a social service. It's not supposed to be revenue generating agency. So if you're asking people to buy JAM form for 5,000, and you saw that you actually do need 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 to operate or to conduct that exam seamlessly, why are you charging over and above what you need, and thereby shutting out many of our pupils and students from higher education? So I think I have an issue with that, making education agencies like NECO, like JAM, to be a revenue generating agencies. They are not supposed to be. And what should have been charged by those agencies were just what they needed to cover their operational costs and logistics. The logistics and operational costs generally. But to now say, okay, when you need 3,000 naira to conduct the exam, you are now asking for 10,000, 15,000 from students. At the end of the day, you are now returning 10 billion to the coffers of federal government. I think that's part of wrong priorities in terms of the Nigerian nation. But coming back to issue of government-owned enterprise, I did, Stanley, I did weigh in a couple of months ago where I looked at the revenue leakages in Nigeria in my column in the Punch newspaper. And I pointed out three things where the government alternatives to borrowing by the federal government of Nigeria. Look at just a couple of days ago, I think it was the Guardian that has on his front page that Nigeria will have borrowed about 71 trillion by this next year when new elected government officials will take offices. So you are likely going to meet empty treasury, and then you are also likely going to meet a very huge debt portfolio or debt burden when you come in as governor or president in 2023. But I did highlighted a number of ways out that we don't actually need to borrow as much as we are currently borrowing, because there are a lot of leakages in the system. Let me take you look at the issue of tax. Did you know that people are still paying tax to banks, using teller and all of that? When in other climes, what people pay tax is a digitized platform that once, for instance, where you pay VAT, the VAT automatically goes to the coffers of the FRS in other climes. It's not that you pay VAT to, you withhold the VAT and then wait for FRS officials to come and reconcile accounts with you to now say, okay, you are supposed to pay 50 million, you remitted 20 million and all of that. It's because it's not automated.
It's not automated.
That makes it easy for those who collect on behalf of FRS to cheat government. And did you know, let me shock you, Nigeria has the worst tax collection ratio to GDP in the world. 6%. 6% is what Nigeria is collecting tax to GDP. When other clients like Norway, Sweden, Finland that we tend to envy, the tax to GDP is about 30 to 40%. But it's because they have a digitized platform. So whatever, whether it's personal income tax, whether it's value-added tax, whether it's a company tax, or whatever taxation they are making, it's automatically deducted from source and remitted to the coffers of government. Not that somebody an hotel will collect VAT and then you have to send people physically to start reconciling. Okay, how many guests did you have? How much did you collect? This should be the appropriate value and all of that. The world has since moved on from there. The world has become everything is automated and digitized. But Nigeria is very reluctant to join the tech-driven world. So that is why we are losing a lot of revenue.
Jide, I would like to hear about some of the other alternatives that you recommended in your article. But before we get there, what about the tax pool? Because if we have a harsh business environment under which we're operating, and the MPC has just increasing the cost of borrowing, effectively, the lending rates from 15 to 16%, isn't it counterproductive to have these automated taxation systems? I mean, right now, we know that a lot of companies, they say if you don't make up to 25 million a year, you're not going to pay income tax, just to encourage the business center. So how do you balance the two, the need to capture more taxes in an automated fashion, and the challenge of businesses that are struggling? Because sometimes, as a businessman, you almost feel as if you've done something wrong in starting a business, because the moment you open a business, the next thing is you have to pay tax for your signboard, your water rates, your all of that, and you say, oh my goodness, look, I'm only trying to do something good over here, and I'm creating jobs.
Now, there are opportunities for tax incentives, Stanley. And the unfortunate thing is that this has also been grossly abused, because those who do not need tax waivers are the ones that are getting it. And you ask yourself, if these big corporations that are declaring multi-billion-dollar profits in a year are still getting tax waivers, then who should pay tax? Because you see, That's why ordinary citizens don't want to pay tax. I am not saying that. I'm not saying. Look, there are different ways by which. Look at how many people pay property tax in Nigeria. You don't need to tax the poor. There are very many rich people who are not paying tax at all or not paying the appropriate tax. Somebody is supposed to pay 5 billion into the coffers of government. He pays 50 million or 500 million. And you start lodging him to say, oh, he's tax compliant. No, he's not tax compliant. What he has paid is a fraction of what he should pay. And you know that there are tax consultants who will help you to cook the books, all around Nigeria for a fee. But what I'm saying is that there are exemptions to the rule. The poor doesn't need to be taxed heavily. And the companies that are not making profits, there are companies that file for bankruptcy. You don't expect a company that is bankrupt to come and pay you tax. And there are incentives, like there is what is called moratorium. When you set up a new business for the first 5-10 years, you may be exempted from paying tax. That is an incentive. The issue of waiver that I talked about is also an incentive to businesses to be able. You recall that when we had COVID-19 in 2020, 2021, the federal government actually did exempt some businesses from paying tax and asked that some certain businesses, categories of businesses should not be ordered for non-compliance with their tax obligations for a period of time. So these are different ways by which government can incentivize businesses. I agree with you completely. There was recently an attempt by the Minister of Finance and National Planning and Budget to also charge 5% tariff on telecommunications. I think against it. Yeah. Because the telecom industry is overtaxed. They said, according to them, they are paying over 40 different taxes and levies. And if you now add another 5% tariff on that, of course, they will pass on to the customers. That's why when you say you may call in Nigeria and you may call in USA, and the one in USA is cheaper than Nigeria, it's because of this excessive taxation. But there are ways by which tax experts can make government to have tax-friendly policies that more people will even willingly want to pay tax. Remember, there was a time they did VAID, voluntary asset something, that they were even setting kiosks at airports to encourage people to pay tax voluntarily, that, okay, your past sins for not paying tax so long is forgiven, let's chart a new course for you and all of that. So there are different ways, but I was citing the example of the property tax. How many Nigerians who are buying properties pay tax on such property?
Absolutely. And Jide, I want to come back to Phil, but before I do that, I need you to comment on this. We have a lot of money laundering going on, and experts have identified property purchase as one of the most convenient ways. And we see this a lot. You see a politician who comes into office, either has one modest home or has no home at all, and the next thing is they own streets. Several streets in several places. And there have also been talks about, civil servants who have been in the system for so long and they own properties. And here in Abuja, we have a peculiar problem that we have lots and lots of houses that are not being used, are not being occupied. And in many cases, the ownership of these houses are shrouded in mystery. So should there be a property tax on all of these properties?
Exactly. There should be property tax, but beyond property tax, before I forget, let me also cite other forms of taxation can bring huge revenue into the coffers of government. Did you know that there are so many online businesses? I don't want to mention names so that it doesn't look like I'm advertising for them. There are so many online businesses that don't have offices in Nigeria, but yet make billions of dollars from Nigerian market. For all these social media platforms, they don't have offices in Nigeria, but look at the number of Nigerians, over 50 million Nigerians consuming their products, and the people place adverts on this media, and they get huge revenue. But they don't pay a dime to the coffers of federal government of Nigeria just because they do not set up offices here in Nigeria. And there are ways by which you can make such to pay tax and huge tax in foreign currencies that I'm restricting myself from naming names. Recall that when there was a suspension of one of the platforms at the federal government, was it last year or 2 years ago? And one of the preconditions for it to reopen for business is to set up a Nigerian office so that, with the huge number of Nigerians who are on that platform and the advert revenue that platform is collecting from consumers, from advertisers, there should be something coming to the federal, to the coffers of federal government. And then coming to the issue of property tax, you are very right that many politicians and other people, categories of Nigerians who wants to engage in money laundering, particularly to evade this redesigning of Naira notes. Many of them have used the funds they have to buy a property and buy jewelries, buy exotic cars, buy landed properties all over, with the hope that when the newly redesigned Naira is in circulation, they can dispose some of this asset and have some liquid cash. Some have bought gold and all of that. So, but these things are not taxed. These things are not taxed because it is even the rich people that know how to evade tax most, because they have consultants working for them. They have lawyers who can get them out of the court system from being convicted and all of that. So the ordinary citizens, I don't think we should touch them in terms of taxation. But there are quite a number of other things that needed to be taxed to encourage more people to come into the tax net and to pay appropriate. But I also do understand that Nigerians do not want to pay tax because they've not seen the benefit of the tax they pay. Look at those who pay, do the payee system. Civil servants whose taxes are deducted from source. How many of them have even buses to convey them to their offices? How many of them? How many of their residences have light, have water, have good road network, have security? You have to also still provide all of this on your own. So people, there's nothing like taxpayers' money working for you in Nigeria. And that is what makes a whole lot of difference between Nigeria and the Western world, where people are taxed, but they see the impact of that taxation on the social amenities that are provided by the state or by the government as it were. So the only way to also encourage more people to voluntarily pay tax is to start seeing the impact of these taxes on the infrastructural development around our communities. Look at Abuja. The satellite communities have practically been abandoned. The concentration is on the heart of the town, the city centers. You see many bridges that are needless, many overhead bridges that are not leading to anywhere. And these are a lot of resources that should have been channeled to support and improve the infrastructures in the satellite towns where many more residents are residing. So you cannot be spoon-feeding the rich in the town and letting the people in the rural communities in the satellite towns. So that is wrong-headed policy. But we need to incentivize more people to pay tax, and we need to block all the leakages that where people use the opportunity to defraud government. Look at the issue of IPPIS, that the Accountant General of the Federation, who is actually supposed to superintend that, was not caught with his hand in the cookie jar. No, with over 109 billion naira embezzlement charges against him and his cronies. How do you explain that? This is an agency that should have been helping to fight corruption. You said you want to weed out ghost workers, and yet you are the one that is the ghost that is swallowing the people's money. So this is contradictions that we have in our system, that there is a lot of leakages, there is a lot of fraud, there is a lot of corruption, and upon all, look at the oil theft. Oil theft is accounted, in the month of August 2022, Nigeria could not even produce up to 1 million barrels per day. And our budget for 2022 was estimated at 1.8 million barrels per day. And so if you cannot produce as of that, and we have to go to non-state actors to now help us protect the pipelines, is it not a failure of government to now rely on non-state actors when we have Navy, we have NEMASA, we have DSS, we have all the military and paramilitary agencies, the SCDC and all of that. They could not protect our pipelines. We have to now go to have a multi-billion-dollar deal with non-state actors to help us protect our pipelines.
Well, Jide, you've given us quite a lot to unpack, but we do have to take a break now. But don't go away, because when we come back, I'll have Phil bounce off of that and also talk about other critical issues. We're talking about how, what alternatives do we actually have to borrowings that can help us to fund our governments more effectively.
Abuja. Wake up. Reach out. Speak up. Speak out. You are the voice of a new generation. And this is your station. Talk Radio 93.7 Citizen FM.
Nigeria go better. Nigeria go better. Nigeria go better. Nigeria go better. If Nigeria go better, now your hand in there. If Nigeria go better, now my hand in there. Make we join us together, make Nigeria for better. 60 years done work, and Nigeria still they can't pay. Oh, it go better. Nigeria still they can't pay. We no break, we no scatter. Nigeria still they can't pay. Oh, it done better. Nigeria still they can't pay. Where are the Igbos, Hausas and Yorubas? Make we come together, cause we be brothers. Forget the language, cause we resemble. Oh, make we live as one, no, and celebrate. 60 years done work, and Nigeria still they can't pay. Oh, it go better. Nigeria still they can't pay. We no break, we no scatter. Nigeria still they can't pay. Oh, it done better. Nigeria still they can't pay. It go better. Nigeria still they can't pay. It done better. Nigeria still they can't pay.
Welcome back. This is Citizen FM 93.7, and you are listening to the Super Citizen at Sunrise. It's time for Big Talk, and our big issue today is about money. Well, the president says that we have to borrow a lot of it in order to run government next year. So we're looking at other ideas. The National Assembly says, well, there are some agencies that can become revenue-generating agencies and therefore should not be allowed to spend whatever it is they get internally. They should abide by rules that demand that a certain percentage of what they earn should be remitted to the revenue account. I'm looking at this with Public Affairs Analyst Jide Ojo and Philemon Ajekuko. Both of you gentlemen are still here. Jide, you're still here with us? Okay. Well, while we try to get Jide back, Philemon, he mentioned quite a number of things. So what's your take on that?
The point he made that hit home is that of automation. But here is my take on automation. And he also made some comment about that. You had the NIPPS, you have the Treasury single account. What has happened between the time that we introduced those automatic systems and now? What has happened? We have had several cases of mind-boggling stealing, right? So what does that tell us? It tells us that it's not just about automating the system. It comes back to the issue of how do we organize ourselves as a people. Most critically would be, what is our social value? Let me tell you something. There's no country in the world where there are no leakages. They take the case of Mena. Look at how long Mena played around with us, even having security men guarding him, moving him around. It took so much effort on the part of EFCC to bring this man to book. Even while in jail, he's still coming up with all kinds of excuses to find a way to get out of jail. And if not that the government has really put his feet down to say, no, we're not going to allow this man to go, that man would be out of jail by now. He would have run away from the place. So how do we organize society? How do we organize this country to make people believe that this is our country? And it's not all about what I can get